Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center Network with support from K-12 and Fuel Education and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. We're really happy to have you join us today for a program that's going to be outstanding. I've met these people and they're wonderful, and they've got a great message to share with you all today. I'm happy to be joined today with Dr. Sandy Addis, who is the director of the National Dropout Prevention Center. And Sandy, I think you're going to find this a fascinating program today.
I know we will, Marty. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is an important issue that we're going to talk about, but I have heard rumors, more than rumors, about the great new things that are happening at the National Dropout Prevention Center. And we often talk about the conferences, and they're always, there's always something coming up, I know that, but there's something new. And I think we need to tell people about what's new.
Marty, we do. You mentioned our conferences. We have 4 conferences right now on schedule. We have, of course, our national conference, which is in October out in Palm Springs, California, in this coming fall, which is a standard. But we have some other things going on, Marty, some new things. We have 2 conferences in Orlando simultaneously, back-to-back, same venue, the Rosen Center, June 25 through 28. We're doing Reaching the Wounded Student Conference, which has to do with serving trauma-impacted students, a very big topic. And then we've launched another special purpose conference, Freshman Success Conference. We know that 9th grade is a critical point in transition for students, and so we're convening folks that are experts in transition strategies to bring in people that work with freshmen and to really focus on that. So both of those conferences in Orlando in June, and we invite people to that. We also have, and this is a new one for us, up in Mackinac City, Michigan, up on the Great Lakes area. It's a beautiful resort in Mackinac City. We have a Diploma Planning Institute up there, a 2-day event for teams to develop graduation rate improvement plans. Diploma Planning Institutes have been very popular. So we actually have 4 conferences on the schedule right now.
Wonderful locations, and good learning can happen in a happy environment like you're providing there. I love the 2-for-1. That's fantastic.
You can roam across the lobby and fellowship and take your pick. Marty, we also have rolled out something that we're very excited about. You know, the 15 effective strategies for dropout prevention is what we call the gold standard for dropout prevention. 32 states have adopted them in some form or another as the foundation for graduation rate improvement. And so we've had a lot of demand for online professional development. So we have developed, and now we've rolled out on our website, we have an online course on each of the 15 effective strategies. These courses are on our website. They're available for purchase individually. They count toward our National Dropout Prevention Specialist Certificate, but they also are being purchased in blocks by school systems to provide online, anytime, anywhere professional development in good dropout prevention, research-based strategies for their staff. So we invite everybody to take a look at these online courses. We're no longer limited by how many people we can put in the field.
I've been peeking at that site, I gotta confess, and I am very eager to delve into some of the ones that I am very particularly interested in, as you know. But they're self-paced, 60 to 90 minutes, and how fantastic, because there's so much online learning going on, and how perfect for teachers and educators whose lives are so busy to be able to have a way to get this professional development, whether as the school or team or on their own. So, boy, that's a tremendous. We wanted to share that with everybody today. We really wanted to. And now we've got another form of our professional development, of course, has been, Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. And today we're looking at the reducing dropouts among culturally and linguistically diverse students. And if we look at that slide, we can see our presenters' names. And Sandy is about to introduce our wonderful presenters today.
Thank you, Marty. I'm very pleased to introduce our presenters. They're a great team, and they have a extremely timely topic. Dr. Davidson Mapinga is an associate professor of career and technical teacher education programs at Kent State University, and you will meet him and hear about one of his areas of expertise here as we get into the culturally and linguistically diverse dropout issue. Mm-hmm. And then Emily Machinga is also a doctoral candidate at Kent State, and she is a lecturer and instructor there at Kent State, and together they bring a fantastic perspective to this whole issue of the challenges of culturally diverse and linguistically diverse students and how we can help them graduate. So Marty, I'm very pleased to introduce Davidson and Emily Machinga.
And Davidson and Emily, welcome to the program. I know we've got a good team effort about to start here, and I believe we start with you, Davidson. So can you get us going on the background about this issue?
Sure. Thanks, and thanks for having us on the show. And I think this topic is Sandy mentioned. We're looking at how do we actually assist or work with culturally and linguistically diverse students and assist them in most of the educational programs that we have. And among the issues that we're going to talk about, first of all, I'll give you a brief background on the demographic characteristics of the situation, what is happening to the changing demographics of our population, and also what are some of the characteristics of the CLD students, as we like to call them, and what are some of the challenges that we often experience in the classrooms. And then lastly, we will focus on what it is that we need to do to create a culturally responsive educator.
Absolutely.
And so,
we always come out with a strategy here, don't we?
Yes,
we actually come up with our solutions, and they're going to provide them.
Yes, thank you. And just starting off with the changing population demographics, if you could put that slide up on the changing demographics. We look at what is going to be happening in the year 2050. The United States is actually going to look a lot different than what it is today. We hear from population experts that obviously whites will no longer be in the majority. And what is currently the minority population, which stands at about 30%, is going to exceed 50%. So which means we have what we call the minority that will be the majority. And when you look at the demographics are also changing in the school right now, where about 47 million speak other languages other than English. And many of the ELL, English as a second language, speak Spanish, the majority of them. And what we are finding out is that many of these that are in our schools right now, we have to deal with them. We have to work with them in one way or another. And when you look at, there was Education Week of August 2014, which talked about the projected enrollment, which actually hit 50.3 in some of the states in this country. And so this is it's becoming a trend that we are seeing on a daily basis. And if we move on to the next slide, which talks about just the general characteristics of who we are talking about, many of them, obviously, they don't speak English. Or they do speak English, but it may be a second or third, language that they speak. And those people that might be in states such as Texas, Florida, and California, you may be aware that many of the students in these states are actually culturally and linguistically diverse students. And if you look at where they live also, which is something that we need to consider as teachers, many of them are in structurally segregated, communities or in urban schools, and they also have poor post-school outcomes. But one of the things that you will find happening with CLD students, we have a combination of some who have no schooling at all, And then you also have some who have a solid educational experiences. So it's not always the case that you're going to have CLD students who don't have any formal schooling before. Some of them will have, extensive background. So that creates a challenge for teachers there in terms of how we have to deal with the two groups. And at the same time, you look at the students, they are still trying to deal with assimilation and acculturation issues. So again, we need to help them as they are coming along to become members of our society. And one of the things one may ask is that why should we even bother to deal with dropout, to deal with CLD dropout students? I think it makes economic sense if you look at it to say the current students, CLD students, will actually be in the labor force, in years to come. And unless we provide the necessary background and education to them, what kind of a society will we have without, with some members of the education of these communities who are not well prepared? And to think about the economic impact that will have on our country, I think it just behooves us to do something or to assist them in preparing them for the life of communities that they're going to live in future. Now, you look at some of the common challenges that we have. Obviously, we talked about many of them are going to require English language. So there's going to be a lot of English language, that will be required in the schools. And then the other issue of students that are living in poverty. I know in so many of the times we do pass through Walmart to buy candy. We may have to be passing through Walmart a couple of times to be doing that. And then the other problem that we have is the teacher-student disconnect. We have teachers who may not be familiar with the life experiences of the students, and that presents a problem when it comes to assisting the students. And in improving the outcomes of this diverse majority or diverse new majority of American students is going to be a challenge for many, many of the teachers. And I think at this point, I will probably turn it over to Emily, who will share some of the challenges, also some additional challenges as it pertains to the classroom situation.
Well, before we get with Emily, I'm just overwhelmed with questions and comments. I bet you are too, Sandy, because I know Davison comes from a background of career and technical education, and Emily comes from a background of working with these cultural issues. But certainly Davison sees the the outcome economically and for each individual as far as their quality of life and the quality of life of our communities and our countries. So that alone is an overwhelming problem. And so Emily, is going to come charging in here with some help for us on helping the outcome. But where do you even start with a question, Sandy? There's just, I bet you had 10. I had 15.
Well, Marty, the why bother is a fantastic point, because as we move through, we've been at Dropout Prevention 30 years in this country, and just as we seem to figure out what to do, we have new challenges,
yes.
and of course that's to be expected. But if we don't deal with this issue with the numbers that Davidson shared with us, if we don't deal with this issue, obviously these students have tremendous challenges between themselves and graduation and being successful in a college and career. And so if we don't deal with this issue, our graduation rate is certainly going to go backwards if the projections of demographic change that Davidson gave us are true, which I'm sure they are.
And Davidson, wouldn't you say that, you put that 2050 slide up there, this is the way it's going to be. But isn't it in many, many communities and cities around our country, isn't this the challenge now?
Oh, yes, certainly. If you talk about, like I said, I gave an example of Texas, Florida, and California. This is what they were dealing with right now. And I work particularly with the career and technical education programs. Many of these students find themselves in the hands-on, career and technical education programs. And so it just, unless we provide the future workforce of tomorrow with the skills that they need, we are not going to have, people, they are going to be left out as, we develop the rest of the community, the rest of our, workforce for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think
it is happening right now. And in fact, some other states, you can pretty much pick on the other states. I just highlighted 3. But I think in every other neighborhood, you can look at and see that there is a common trend that we are moving in that direction. And so it's coming.
It's coming.
It's not yet
now.
there.
And this is, in a way, I see this program also as an awareness raising that this is coming, and it may actually even be in many communities who don't realize it yet now. And so we've got some wonderful solutions for these communities and schools and communities today. So Emily, you're going to jump in now. It's just great to see you.
Great to see you too. Hi, Sandy. I'm going to highlight some of the challenges in CLD classrooms. It's not an exhaustive list, but just some highlights. I have a slide, if it can be up, that would be wonderful. Differences in cultural values. There is definitely differences between the educators and the students in terms of their cultural values. So sometimes when you are an educator and you're in a classroom with students who are culturally different, sometimes we have to check out the cultural values that mean something to those students. The other challenge is cultural barriers, where students are persistent with the use of their first language. And sometimes it becomes difficult for the teacher to continue communicating and teaching while the student is using their first language that the teacher may not understand. Sometimes also we may have some students who may be overly dependent on the teachers because of the language barrier. Sometimes unclear expectations and unclear instructions from the teacher, and it becomes so difficult for the learner to pick up what they're supposed to get from the teacher. There is also strong student dominance, particularly from the majority culture, where students, for example, they'll fill in the gaps when a culturally and linguistically different student is failing to articulate. A student from the majority culture may jump in and finish sentences. And that's actually may be a disadvantage to the culturally and linguistically different student, because they will miss out on learning some of the words and concepts that are being talked about in class. Sometimes they may also, teachers may experience some defiance, distracting and inattentive behaviors that may be presented by these culturally and linguistically different students. And that may be also very, would seem like these students are unmotivated. And yet it may be just the language barrier and the ways that are being used by the teacher that are different. Another thing that we also have to pay attention to is academic integrity. Mostly with the culturally and linguistically different students, they may value harmony and cooperative learning more than competition. And so sometimes they may find themselves cheating, and they may not think that it's cheating. It's just helping one another because we want everybody to succeed. Whereas the majority culture, when a student is looking into the textbook or into their notes during an exam, it may be considered as teaching. Another example of that also is you may find that the culturally and linguistically different students may write assignments for one another. And for them, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just helping one another. And yet some teachers may look at that as teaching. So because of some of these challenges, I think we need culturally and linguistically responsive educators, which is coming up on the next slide. And we suggest that educators become culturally aware and sensitive. We also suggest that they ought to build relationships with students as well as the students' families. Educators also need to be culturally responsive, need to use culturally responsive classroom strategies. In terms of cultural awareness and sensitivity, on the next slide, culture shapes everything that we do. This may involve personal space, body language, voice volume, and it has to be two-sided. The teacher ought to be aware of their own culture and the students' culture as well. Sometimes, for example, we may take a thing like communication. Communication is the vehicle for all education and learning and all interactions that happen in the classroom. But what is most important feature in communication? That may differ between what the teacher says and what the student says. Mostly in the dominant US culture, most teachers use what I refer to as low context communication. This is where logic is important. Communication is linear. The focus is on facts. There is directiveness in teaching and learning. Meaning of concepts and events may lie in words. Whereas, on the other hand, students may be using high context communication, where they value interpersonal relationships. They are focusing on developing trust. They're focusing on group harmony rather than competition. And words may not mean much, but context may be important. And then again, we also have to be aware of that educators need to be aware of their own assumptions and taking notice when making a judgment, whether it's positive or negative about a parent or a child, and figure out what that judgment is all about and what is based on. Do you have evidence that may support whatever your conclusion is with the judgment that you are making? Then another point which is important also is to learn about the student's culture. It doesn't mean that you have to learn everything. It's so difficult because teachers may have more than 5 students each year that are culturally and linguistically different. But just knowing the basics, the common characteristics of different cultures. And again, students' cultures should not be limited to race and ethnicity. It may be religion. It may be geographical location of where they live. It could be maybe sexual orientation. So we have to take all these into consideration when trying to understand our students. Building relationships with parents and students, as I indicated earlier, is also important. I'll only touch on relationship with students, and Davison will pick up on relationship with parents. It's as simple as just learning students' names. Most of these students have foreign names. And sometimes we want to change their names and encourage them to pick up on English names. Those names may mean something in their culture. And so by making them pick up a different name which may not have a meaning on them, may seem like educators don't care for them. So just that learning about the students' names may help with building rapport. So how do we even learn these foreign names? Maybe just writing the students' names phonetically. So you can practice whenever you are talking to them or interacting with them, they are raising their hand to give out an answer, call them by name, just like you do with any other kids. That will be so helpful to just help start off developing trust and building rapport. And Davison will talk about some highlights on relationships with parents. Okay.
Before I go on to that, I am not sure that Maddie, you need to come in or you have a question before we move on to that.
Well, I think one of the things that struck me is there's 2 major issues here. One is language. Now, Sandy and Davison and Emily, I have been endeavoring for the last many years to learn Spanish. And what I am learning, because I Skype with my friends who live in South America to help me, that there's no straight translation. And in a different culture, the way the sentence is structured, the meaning is totally different than what you think it's saying. And so having said that, with multiple cultural backgrounds, multiple languages in your classroom, this is challenging. But we also have some communities where one language might be Spanish. That's pretty prevalent. And I wanted to pose this to everybody here. on the language side is teacher education preparation is going to have to include a more rigorous component about language instruction. Now, I know in the past we all had to take languages to be aware of other cultures. It helps us, see the world. But now it's pretty much every day you're going to need some facility in a language. And are we seeing that? Are we seeing teacher education programs changing? Are we seeing teachers going back to learn languages? Because it goes both ways. The communication to understand, for me, it goes both ways because they're having the same problem with English. So how do we address the language piece? And then we'll talk about the cultural one next.
Good question.
You're the experts. You're the experts.
Well, I wish we were able to control what happens with the teacher education programs.
Don't we all?
That would be a good suggestion. I think just being open about it, first of all, and letting the teachers kind of right now, yes, I think it would be a good thing for me to learn another language, or it would be important for our teachers to just learn the language of the students they're going to be working with. And whether they do that through the students themselves, here's another point that I was going to make. I have one of my teachers who realized that a sizable proportion of his students in one class were speaking Spanish, but he did not understand the language. So what he ended up doing was he created what he calls a language time. It's like 5 or 10 minutes of his lesson where he says to the students, you teach us a Spanish word and we will teach you an English word. Now, that helps both, groups of students. We pick up an English word, they pick up, a Spanish word. And the teacher gets to learn also in the process. And that has helped to also bring, they've used these differences to their advantage. Instead of just saying, well, you speak your language, I speak mine. The students at the end of the semester will probably have what we might call functional Spanish, which they actually picked up in an automotive class. But I think such strategies, which may be helpful to the teachers as opposed to also, if they can't find time to really sit down and take a module or a lesson on the language. But it would be helpful, I would say, to get another language, tagged, or another language, for the teachers to learn another language as they prepare to go into the culturally diverse environments.
I agree with Davison. And what I found helpful also is those informal interactions that teachers have with their students. Have lunch with your students, have some informal conversations, which are not graded. Because whenever I've observed the culturally and linguistically different student, whenever things are formal, then they are hesitant to interact or to speak because they may be anxious because they don't want to mess up the English language. So during informal interactions, during lunchtime, during recess, during PE time, where really language is not a factor, if teachers can engage students and interact with them in those kinds of settings, it may help. Because as Davison was saying, sometimes it's not easy for every teacher to go and learn formally all the languages that are out there.
And I see, what you're also saying is that the students with their second language have a benefit that the students who just have English don't have. And so they can become, I'm jealous of them for, being, at a young age learning two languages. So, but they have something to offer their English-speaking students and their teacher, as you point out, where they can also be empowered as something special to offer. So I think it's kind of like it could be a nice win-win both sides.
Certainly, and I'm sitting here thinking, two things. One is in some settings that we've worked with some school systems that have a number of languages in one classroom. Of the language of origin is a language that where a teacher may have 5 or 6 different languages. We worked with a school system in Ohio that said they had 40-something languages represented in the school system, and so I thought, well, okay, now that's a challenge.
That's a different challenge.
It
I
is,
think,
and so we've got two things going on. One is learn to adapt to the language issue, and the other one is to adapt to the cultural differences.
Yes.
And so we've got two simultaneous tasks for the teacher going on here, and now we've added another responsibility to the teacher, which is to understand and learn an additional set of skills and understandings about these students. So it's not easy.
Yes, you can travel, but you don't have to leave your town, because you're going to meet some people with cultural issues that are so different than yours, and it's really very interesting. I think we need to be positive about this, because I think it stretches all of us, because I think we learn from each other, our common humanity, yes, but also how we all play out and deal with it. So that's an important thing. Are we moving now, Davison, into strategies?
Yes.
All right.
I was going to look just briefly on an important point before we move on to culturally responsive strategies, that of building relationships with families. I think that is crucial when we're talking about reducing dropouts. I think this is, I look at it as a team effort. The school does their part, the community, we often talk of it takes a village to raise a child. And so involving the parents in the education of their children is also important. And particularly when it comes to the teacher building a rapport with the families, just letting them know that you care about their child, I think is crucial. And also we have in some cases, getting to know their traditions and the communities where they live. It may be also just a simple thing as just saying, oh, we had a function over the weekend. Oh, if you don't mind, may I come and attend, and get to know what goes on there. I think that shows the students that you care. It also shows the parents that you care. And maybe that might be an informal setting for the teacher to explain what exactly the role that the teachers play when it comes to educating their children.
This is an interesting area, the parent piece and the family piece. Traditionally in dropout prevention, many of our dropouts' parents hated school. And they don't want to have anything to do with the school.
True.
But I find it very interesting, and in conversations we have had over the times that we've known each other, how parents from other cultures look at this differently, because they want they have the community is part of their piece. Their perspective is different, and it's about what's best for their child, and their culture is more attuned to connecting with the school and other parts of the community for the benefit of the family. Could you comment on that? Because that's a different lens for us in dropout prevention to look through.
It is.
Yes, it is. Just based on the fact that the majority culture, which would include most of our educators here, they come from individualistic society, just like you are saying, Marty. And most of the culturally and linguistically different students are coming from collectivistic culture, where it takes a village to raise a child. So it's so much easier for these parents to join in and be supportive in terms of how to engage the children in school.
Yeah, this is a real plus to build on, and I think people who may not be aware of that don't realize that this is going to actually be quite fun. They've got a lot to contribute. This is great.
Sure. I think now we can move on to look at what are some of the culturally responsive strategies for those teachers who are going to be working with students in the classroom. We talk of using simple vocabulary structures as well as shorter sentences. Understanding that English might not be their second, it might be their fourth language that they speak at home. And so using the technical jargon or using the big words or which they don't understand, that may also be a problem. And I can give several examples, that we have. For instance, in my mother language or the other language that I speak, where English is the fourth one, the sentence structure is a little different. We may have, in some cases, that the subject might actually be at the end, depending what language you're speaking.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
Right. That might be right. And then also we have the other issues of having to limit the use of idioms or use of slang. I mean, I remember, for instance, when somebody said, "What's up?" my immediate reaction was to look up because I thought maybe they were referring to something that was coming up. And then when you talk about using colloquials, that may also be confusing. For instance, when you say somebody was beaten pretty good, how can a beating be good? How can it be
Pretty.
How can it be pretty? So I think it's like, I'm trying to learn your language, but you are combining two words that are, make it difficult for me to understand what you're saying. And also, I think I remember having a situation where I was offered iced tea. My understanding of tea is something that is hot. So now you are throwing in ice to something that is supposed to be hot. That you're losing me right there. And then, so I think you also have issue of pronouns. Emily, you wanted to jump in on that one.
Oh, pronouns, the use of he, she. In our language, we don't have direct translation of he, she. We use they, the translation of they, particularly for anybody who is an adult. We use they. So sometimes when somebody is talking about a girl and they're saying he, for us, it's the same word. We don't have a literal translation of he, she, so we use they, and most of the time if it's written, of course, the child would have messed up, and then you get confused. Why is this wrong? That's what we always say, that's what we always do, and our teachers would emphasize that. And now when you come to the English language, you don't have those direct translations, so that's interesting.
Oh, it is.
And if I may add other strategies that are up on the slide, it may also be important to label some items in the class in several languages. For instance, remember they're beginning to pick up on the language here. Basic, here is a door. And maybe what do you call a door in another language? Even if we have 3 or 4 languages, I would probably label that door in the 3-4 different languages. That way the other students get to know what a door is, and also in a different language. And the use of gestures is also another important one. And I'm also reminded at this point here, if some viewers may have seen, I think in the movie Rush Hour, I think it's Rush Hour 1 or Rush Hour 2, where Jackie Chan is talking to, I think it was Chris Tucker talking to Jackie Chan, and he says, "Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth?" And his volume is quite high. There are times, in fact, raising your volume, if I don't understand the language, makes no difference. So I think at that point, just understanding that the pitch, whether you raise it to, it's the language that I don't understand here. I don't have a hearing problem. I have an understanding of the language as a problem. And then lastly, on that slide, using of gestures, facial expressions can also help to clarify what you are talking about, because right at the beginning, when I don't understand the meaning of the word, I tend to look at your physical expressions.
And aren't facial expressions kind of universal?
Facial expressions are universal, but the meanings may be different.
Oh, then that's a problem.
Okay.
The meanings may be different. I can give you an example.
Yes.
For most people, if somebody smiles, it means all is okay. I'm fine. I'm kind of happy. But I remember some of my Asian friends, when they are smiling, it's a sign of embarrassment.
Oh my
So
goodness.
they may be the same, but meanings may be different.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we really appreciate you because you've been on this road, on this journey of coming to another country armed with apparently several languages and including English, but discovering, even having learned English when you got here, that what's up, or whatever the other different things are that you didn't know what they meant, or iced tea. I love that one. So don't you see a lot in this whole thing about
sure.
language? Oh my goodness.
Sure I do. Let me ask a question. If I'm a principal of elementary school or middle school, and over just a short period of time, my school becomes more diverse. I start to have an influx of students who are culturally and linguistically diverse. What do I do for my teachers? What's one of the first things I can do to help my teachers move forward and help these kids be successful?
I would start first of all with creating a team or creating a faculty that is culturally sensitive. I think that is the bottom line. Make sure that they take their time to understand the characteristics and the needs of the students that they're going to be working with. It's kind of difficult to prescribe because there are so many different groups of students. But I think just making sure that the teachers that you have do go out with an open mind and a willingness to learn, I think that might be a first starting point. And the students themselves they are happy. They'll be more than happy to share with you what they know or what is different about them. So I think it starts off by you saying, oh, you know what, I don't understand this. Can you teach me, or can you explain to me how to go about it? I think that would be a good starting point. And in addition to finding any other literature that may pertain to certain groups, but again, knowing that each individual may be a little different than what is, what you're finding in the literature that you might have.
Good points, Davison. I also need to add ideas that are having professional development and encouraging teachers to go to conferences where such topics like this are being discussed. It might not mean that you're going to get all the answers to the problems, but it's a good starting point. So workshops, professional development, even within the school, inviting guests to come to the school, or just providing some finances for teachers to go out to conferences like those that discuss topics like these.
Right. Again, making use of the school and community partnership, you might have a lot of resources within your community. Parents for these children may be helpful, when it comes to understanding, these children. So let's not discount them. I mean, they're there and they would love to come and talk to the school. So we could have a short discussion over lunch about certain topics that we need to understand. That may be one thing I would suggest.
Okay.
In addition, translators, some parents love to volunteer to translate within classrooms. So I've often seen teachers invite parents to come as volunteers to translate languages.
I love listening to this because my little framework of dropout prevention life is a 15 strategies. And I'm thinking, okay, systemic renewal, about working with your school to develop the idea of cultural awareness. And then we talk about the community resources that you have out there and the parent involvement. It's all there.
It certainly
it's all
is
there.
Robert.
And just in one answer to one question, boy, and I think I missed one, but it's because you're overwhelming me with your knowledge and your advice. We're ready to move on. We are ready to move on.
Sure.
Okay.
And then we're looking at the last slide on the, culturally responsive classroom strategies.
Yes.
Again, I think we talked about those, supplementing oral instructions with visuals where possible. I think that that will help, in the understanding of the content being taught. And also constantly checking students' understanding, comprehension of the material, that would help. And the last point there is one that I might want to emphasize on: creating a non-threatening environment. I think that is crucial because then it allows sort of freedom for expression from either sides. If you don't know it, then the students are more than willing to jump in and say, oh, you didn't know this. And, equally the same, if students are more than welcome to come and explain to you some things, or they explain to the rest of the class what it is that they feel like is not happening. So I think a couple of, from most of these strategies, it starts off with the teacher just realizing that, well, I don't know, but I'm going to ask. And you don't get offended by me asking, and many of them would be more than happy to explain or share, or clarify any misconceptions that you might have.
Well, I think there's some real specific things here. It sounds to me, now I'm not 25 years old, as most of you know, but starting out, I find this presentation or environment of teaching exciting because of some of the, what we would look at as challenges, but opportunities. And with the community being having so much to give and having a mindset from what I'm hearing you say, and that they do want to contribute, they do want to be part of the community, they want their children to succeed in this country, and so there's that. But as far as actual teaching, is that going to be harder? Is that going to be really tear your hair? I'm 25 years old, I just started teaching, I love the community, they're so engaged, they're so involved, but get me back in that classroom and I've got to make sure this child could read, I've got to make sure this can happen. So how does that play out? Is that still, Sandy talked about the school, he was principal, I was a teacher. So, okay, I'm in my classroom with my little second graders and I've got to get them reading.
We got to pass the test.
Yeah, they got to pass the test and they got to understand what they're reading and comprehend it,
So.
And what about these summer reading programs? I mean, I just don't know what to do. Do you really get down in school districts and help people with that?
Well, may not be directly, because the teachers I work with mainly are at the secondary school level. So might have a little limited experience in dealing with the younger grades, students in younger grades. But I would think that even at that level, it's the whole notion of, when you talk about the test, again, I am more sort of inclined to comment on the standardized tests, which may not be applicable because the language level of these other students, they may not be at the same level as the other students. And so I think it still becomes a challenge to say, how would they be able to take the same test when they're just learning, they just have functional English.
Yes.
So I think it's a question of sort of scaling down or differentiating their instruction to be able to accommodate their language levels. Otherwise, trying to say, well, I know you have to pass the test. I do have to pass the test, but the test is going to be in English, and my proficiency in the language is kind of limited. And so that should be taken into account when considering how much the teacher has actually helped the student.
Would it be fair to say that maybe our traditional method of assessment and accountability is not up to the task that we face?
I think if I say yes, I know I wouldn't be the first one to say that.
Okay.
But it certainly it's an issue, unless, in fact, when we come up with assessments, that's one of the issues we need to take into account. The cultural background of our students. And in this particular case, you also need to look at their language, their proficiency in the language.
Yes. If I may also add, in terms of assessment, even question and answer within the classroom, I often see that education here is so fast-paced. Sometimes you get a question and the teacher is expecting a response right away. Sometimes with students who are linguistically different, they may need a little bit more time to think about it. So it may be helpful for teachers to pose a question and let everybody write down their answers. so that the other students can process, because it's quite a process to understand something in a different language. And then you have to translate it into your own language before you even come up with an answer. Once you have an answer, it's in your language, and you want to translate it back into English. So the few seconds that teachers are giving for immediate responses might not work. And it may seem like students are not understanding or students don't care, but it's actually we need more time to process. And it may work that way. And another thing on our assessment, especially the test and the quizzes, if teachers may give more time to the culturally and linguistically different students, that will be helpful. Because I believe that a test, we are not testing on speed. We are testing on understanding. Do the students get the concept? Are they understanding the material? So if you give me or a linguistically different student, I'm just saying me because I'm still a student, if you give me 5 minutes, I may still be reading the question over and over to get the understanding, while everybody else has just read once and they are done with their writing. And the emphasis that I've seen also is the use of computers in test taking. Some of these students are coming from cultures and countries where they don't have computers. The first time they see a computer is when they get to the United States, and they're expected to take a test on a computer. Why not provide an alternative and use pencil and paper? Most of these students are so used to pencil and paper, and most of the time when some of us learned English, the emphasis was on writing. So teachers shouldn't worry much about spelling or grammar. We get it. We only have an accent, but the spelling and the grammar, we may do just well. But using a computer may be taking us so much time to finish. So if I can get a pencil and paper, I'll be just fine. So it's just a trial and error for teachers to see what works best for the student.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We don't need to do it in 5 minutes. We need to show that we have understanding, and when you see what, you go for this language or this, back and forth, this is going to take time. And there are different techniques that can be used to enable you to really assess those students. We have a lot of changes ahead, don't we, in our schools and in our country about teaching, instruction, assessment, and all sorts of preparation and all that. So, wow! Oh my goodness! It's a terrific topic. I think we've got some summaries to do here, don't we?
Yeah, I think bottom line is, from all that we have talked about, it's almost a moving target. And so having to hit the moving target is going to be our real challenge here. But I think nevertheless, we need to try, we need to try to hit it. We need to try something, to improve on what we're doing right now. So a couple of things that we would need to do is, just the basic learning your own culture. Understanding your own culture might actually help to understand and learn about your students' culture as well. Take a look at what are the differences between the two. And when it comes to language, look at the linguistic traits, look at the linguistic, the language differences between the teachers and the students that you have. And then use this knowledge to inform how or you're going to be teaching the students. And another point that we did not mention earlier on was the use of multicultural materials and examples. I think it is just fair where you have so many examples, so many different students. You could point to, the different boys, girls, different groups of students in your class to be part of the examples that you are using. And then the other important piece that we also talked about, we cannot afford to leave out the students' families in this struggle. We are going to need them from the beginning all the way to the end. And if anything at all, if you are in doubt of how to behave, consult others, consult students, and get some help, from the people around you. And as we say, we all can be part of this solution.
Yes, indeed. And we all need to be part of this solution. This is a real community effort. but I think there's value on both sides to solve it. We could do this.
Sure. You know, I'm thinking too, you said early on that you know, build those relationships, and I'm sitting here as an educator who has not worked very much in diverse settings in my background. I'm thinking, you know, the first thing I would do while I'm trying to learn all these other skills and other understandings and maybe another language, if I can build that relationship, if I make a mistake, I'll have forgiveness.
Yeah.
If I say something that's culturally less than appropriate, if I have the relationship with that student, then we've got grounds to work on. So I see that as the foundation piece. I'm sitting here thinking that's the first place I would go with a non-diverse experienced person. I would go with the relationships with the families and the trust, and then we'll build on the information and the skill sets.
Yeah, but everybody cares about that child. And when parents and communities realize that you, the teacher, the school, do really care about our children, we're right there with you. You know, the other thing I've always found is if you know a few words in their language, they'll forgive you, like you say, they'll forgive you, and they will be pleased that you're trying. So I think we need to try and bridge that just yes, English, but yes, we want to be able to connect with you where you are, particularly the parents who may be coming here with a few language skills and oftentimes depend on their children to be their translators. I think you see that a lot, don't you?
Sure.
Yeah.
We do. I mean, we have one of our local schools here, which has, I think the district has about 15 or over 15 ELL teachers. We have a lot of migrant populations, and for any communication that goes out from the school, it's translated into the languages that the school, the students are coming from. And the parents from the community, are actually helping the school to do that, to get the word out. I think that shows that, working together sort of spirit with the school and the community. And parents are quick to jump in and help whenever they are needed. So it's a very important part of, solving this problem.
Excellent.
Well, I think this has been an awareness raiser, has it not? In so many ways, and we certainly hope our viewers agree with us. I can't imagine how they couldn't. Lots to think about and lots to appreciate about the actual strategies and approaches that you two have shared with us today. And I think it's so important that you have traveled this road, both of you, and you know kind of some of the things that people from other countries are experiences, and that really gives some real validity to what you're saying. It's not just research. This is having lived it. There's nothing like experience, but you are passing this wisdom on to your students there at Kent State University, and now to our National Dropout Prevention Network and other viewers who are watching us today. So I first want to thank you both for taking the time on this busy day to join Sandy and me for this important topic and this discussion.
Davidson, Emily, you've really opened our eyes. You've made me think how complex and challenging, but yet how important this is, that we communicate, because we're facing another era of challenge in improving graduation rates, and if we don't do it, we're going to have some problems to face. So it's worth the doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it was wonderful. Well, it just shows you, Sandy Addis, that dropout prevention isn't same old,
No, it's not, Marty. No, it's not.
And yet, what I loved noticing during this whole presentation was how the effective strategies, which Sandy mentioned at the beginning and that online course, oh man, if you don't know about those, you need to follow up with that, because embedded in your work are so many of the strategies that have been proven, research-based, proven effective. And that's kind of the way to look at what people are doing in whatever area dropout prevention is. Are we engaging these effective strategies? And I just love that whenever I go to school or anywhere and hearing this presentation, going, wow, you've overwhelmed us with effective strategies that work for your particular topic, and it makes it feel even more research-based than it already is.
It does. And thank you guys for doing this work. This is so important. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we've
Thank
got
you once again.
we've got an
Thank you.
interesting 25 years coming up ahead, or whatever the math is. You know, I'm terrible
right.
in math, but he said 2050. But it's, as he said, it's now.
Mm-hmm.
It's now. Well, I think we've come to the end of another wonderful solutions broadcast.
We have, Morty.
And we've got a wonderful one next month as well.
Yes.
We're going to talk about student engagement based on a report from the center. So it just never ends. The dropout prevention solutions problems, or solutions rather. There's always a good one around the corner.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Well, thank you, Marty, and it's been a great show.
enjoyed having you here. I know I'll see you again.
You will.
Yeah. So, and to our viewers, I hope we'll see you again next month for Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. Thanks for joining us. Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time.